G'day. One of the things that I've been working on for some time now, and one of the reasons I've also been pushed for a bit of time to make more complex projects, is that I've been working on some ramps for a wheelchair. A TAB client wants to go travelling and needs ramps to help her get into bed and all that sort of thing at hotels. And so I've been working on these. So these are aluminium. The ramp part folds up and then there's a little platform to position yourself on. Quite complex. So this video is more I guess just a bloggy sort of thing as to the steps I've gone through to make it. Originally I was going to make this out of aluminium extrusion, but when the call came in for it to be as light as possible, I went to sheet metal. So there's a bit of, quite a lot of folded sheet metal here. There's a bit of welding, all that sort of thing. And the clip ends with these things going out to a trial fitment. Now, I've done the trial fitment and there's a few minor modifications to make. So if that's of interest to people, please comment below. Otherwise, minor mods, I'll just leave those because I think this is the major part. The mods are just going to be a few cutouts and bits and pieces to try and just finish the thing off. This is a cross section of the two pieces I'm making. One for each wheel. This is the outside, this is the inside, and that is extended there because the wheel of the wheelchair is going to be sitting around about there somewhere, and so that gives me a little bit of extra strength. I was originally going to fabricate this out of extrusions, but when I started looking at the cost of the extrusions and how many I'd have to have and all that sort of thing, it seemed that making it out of sheet metal and bending it would probably give me as good a result, save quite a bit of money and a few other things like that. So this is the way I'm going at the moment. This is all experimental, sitting up in my head, so hopefully it all works. However, I'm starting with cutting out my pieces of material, and I've gone through and numbered the individual pieces. These ones marked 3 I'm going to be leaving till last because they're a filler piece. They're just to cover things up, so I can leave those and put them in later. But certainly this one in blue, this one in red, and this one in red, I'll be making up now. Now, when I bought my material, I asked the people at the metal supplier to cut it into a 600 wide strip, which is about the length that I'm going to want it. And so I've got a 600 by 1200 wide strip. I've actually got 2 of those. And that means that I don't have to worry about cutting these things to length. Usually when I get a sheet of material, and just pretending this is a sheet of material, I'll cut the big pieces off and then I'll cut the smaller ones. The reason for that is, well, a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that the guillotined edges are far better than I can get with my bench shears, and so, if that's a straight edge, I'm going to keep that as a straight edge. But the other thing is that if I'm cutting material or pieces out of a piece of material, I'd much prefer to find that I can't get a small piece out of the middle than get start with the small pieces, work my way along, and then discover that a big piece is missed by just a small amount, which if I hadn't done one of the small pieces, I could have got. So it's a more efficient use of material that way. My cutting method already seems to have saved me some material here. I've cut the 2 largest pieces and the 2 second largest pieces. The next 2 are around about 230 wide. Now, this is the material I've got left, and that's 220. So I could get 1 out of there, I certainly wouldn't get 2. If I got 1 out of there, I'd get a piece which was 85. Now, the smallest pieces are 54, which means I'd only get 1 of those out of there. However, at 220, those small pieces are 54 wide. And so what could possibly happen is I could actually get 4 small pieces out of this piece of material. It just means I have to cut a couple of pieces 130 wide out of the rest of the material I've got, which isn't a problem. but you know, that just goes to show that if I'd started off with the small pieces, I could have a piece, you know, 200, 250 wide, which I couldn't use on this job, just because it's the wrong width. I've cut out my 130 wide pieces. I'm relatively happy with that. I managed to cut it reasonably straight. Sometimes I can do a bit of a snake thing. One thing that is necessary is one of these things. It's a deburring device, and it runs along the edge of the sheet metal like so. But those of you who do sheet metal probably already have something like this, but you need some way of deburring that sheet metal because it will cut you. Don't ask me how I know that one. I'm now on to bending. Something like this, I try to cut all the pieces out first, and then I do the bending. That way I don't have to worry about, you know, several things at once. So I've got two bends there, and then I've got this bend here. Now, the way I've actually drawn this, I've got the inside dimensions here because that's where my bends are going to be. And then this one here is dimensioned. The inside corner is dimensioned from that outside. And that's deliberate because I'm going to be probably bend this one, then bend this one. Once all that's bent, I'll then mark from this corner for that bend there. Okay. Now, I've got my pieces of material here. I've put a mark on here, and these are the sides I'm going to take my measurements from. If this was a guillotined edge, then I could use that, as I know it's straight as it is. I'm reasonably happy with these, but I'm going to put use my odd leg calipers, which I've modified so they stay fixed, and scribe a couple of lines. Now, strictly speaking, I don't need to go all the way along, because on my bender I usually line up with the pieces on the end. I don't worry about what the fingers are doing in the middle here. So that's the first bend. I'll then do this one, widen these out to the next bend, do those, then off to the bender to put those folds in it. The 2 parts and the 4 parts, as I've named them, are all pretty straightforward. I've started, in the case of the 4s, I've started from here. I've just gone around, bend, bend, bend. That one's going to be reasonably straightforward. The only thing there will be that because of the height of the fingers, I need to end on that bend rather than this bend. These ones here, as I said, I'll bend those 2 inside ones, then mark up that bend to kick it back. The top pieces here in blue are slightly different. Because they're a symmetrical part, what I've done for those is I've marked on them a centre line, and then those inside bends I've got from that centre line. I've marked in from the edge on both edges, and so if that setting and that setting the same, I should have a symmetric part out of that. Just to show that sometimes it doesn't always go to plan, I'm bending this panel in the sequence I thought, but I've discovered that I have to remove the fingers from part of the leaf here to get the parts in and out. So sometimes these things happen. For those keen press brake watchers too, I've put the counterweight on here to cope with the longer length, so it's handy to have that around the place even if you don't normally use it for the small stuff. So here are my bent profiles, and they actually look almost like the drawing. I'm going to weld these together, put some tacks in, all that sort of thing before I put in these fill-in pieces here. I need to go over and just sort of check squareness and all that sort of thing of angles, because these don't quite line up, but that'll by the time I finish with that, that'll be fine. But you know, there is one wheelchair ramp, and doesn't weigh terribly much at all. Oh, in case anybody was wondering, this blue stuff is a protective film meant to stop the surface getting scratched up. And usually when fabricating something like this, you leave it in place as long as you can, just to protect the surface. I'm making up the mitre pieces for the ends. I need to put an end cap on it, and I thought rather than having a sharp corner, a mitre would probably be a little bit nicer. And so cutting these notches out, and the how much to take away is basically just half the angle that's left over after it's bent. So most people know that 90 is 245s, but if you want to get this 135, then it's 45 divided by 2, 22.5. These ones are easy enough. They're basically just a flat channel, and I've just worked out where the centres are, scribed some lines down for the cut, and then put some guidelines in there with pencil just to keep me roughly in the right spot. It's not going to matter too much for these because I'm going to fill any gaps relatively easily. These ones are tricky because you don't want that going through the saw like that. It'll tend to pull. And so what I've done is I've just cut some blocks of wood, and they're going to act as a support so that I can cut those without without it trying to flip on me, and that'll just keep me a bit safer and try not to get my hand in the blade. I'm doing a little bit of early morning welding before it gets too hot. These are the ramps that the chair will actually go up to get to the platform, and they obviously need to be rather rigid. They're going to have the weight of a wheelchair on there. When you start adding a wheelchair and a few other odds and sods, it can get heavy. So what I've done is I've put basically some ribs on the back here. Now underneath here I've got a section of 3mm thick strip, and then I've covered that with a cap and tacked that down. I'm only putting tacks on because I'm getting enough heat distortion out of this as it is. You can see there, for instance, where the material has just pulled away slightly, as opposed to that one where the joint was nicely clamped. So just spots every so often to hold everything together, and that's certainly rigid enough. I can stand on that, and that will, well, it'll bend a little bit, but certainly won't bend terribly much. This is my bottom frame all welded up. As you can see, I've put a whole bunch of holes in there trying to keep things light. I can tell you one thing, they're a pain in the neck to try and deburr. There's so many of them. However, that's the bottom section joined up, and then the top section will sit on there, and I'll weld that across, and I'm pretty much broken the back of it then. It's just a matter of trimming up some edges, putting some side pieces in, and going from there. This is progress. The first time the two halves have been together. And you can see the basic idea was that this lower frame here welds onto the tread plate. There's a piece in here, but there's more filling to go around here, and the ramps will hinge off the back here. This is the last part of this ramp video. I've got the ramps and the platforms together. I've mounted some hinges here with some nutserts into the aluminium extrusions. These now fold down. We're now going to go to a test fit and see that the wheelchair does actually go up and the fits, that it's not, this lump isn't too much, although what I do if that's the case, I don't know. Once we've checked that, I can then patch some of these holes here, or not patch, but fill some of these holes, and get it all presentable. And that'll be the first stage of this project done. There are some riser blocks which go underneath, and I'm yet to attach those. I'll have to do a little bit of modification here to do that. But as far as this one goes, hope it was instructive, and thanks for watching.